Welcome to the global phenomenon, Surviving the Survivor, where we bring you the best guests in all of true crime. This is a STS special, Surviving My Biggest Case. Here's your host, Emmy Award-winning journalist, Joel Waldman.
What's up, STS Nation? Welcome to another episode of Surviving the Survivor. It is the podcast that promises to bring you the very best guests in all of true crime. And even though the man at the top, Buzz Bradley, said it's live, this is not a live episode, but rather an episode that we do on tape called Surviving My Biggest Case. And we have former law enforcement officers, criminal profilers, high-profile criminal defense attorneys, you name it. They come on, they tell us about a case in their career that really stands out, and I am pleased and honored to welcome to, again, he's been helping us out a lot with the Luigi Mangione case, Richard Koprowski, 30 years with the NYPD, best police department in the nation. He started off in the 2-5 precinct on patrol for 4 years, and then went to the anti-crime unit for 3 years, eventually becoming a detective, doing everything from aggravated assaults all the way up to homicides. And then, like all good police officers who are lucky enough to make it through in one piece, he retired in May of 2023. Rich, thanks so much for being a best guest, being here the last bunch of weeks on Luigi Mangione. Today, we're going to talk about a case involving a person named Adan Gonzalez. I believe it's spelled A-D-E-N Gonzalez. And before we get there, my first question to all you guys, what made you want to become a police officer?
Well, I started out as there really wasn't much else I could do. I didn't have many qualifications other than, being a cop. So yeah, I took the test when I was young, about 17, 18 years old. And then took a long time. We used to have a lot of guys take the test back then. And just wanted to help people. Plus, I'm not going to lie, it was a great job with benefits, looking for that, great retirement. So
yeah, you get it's an amazing pension. It's an honorable job, as my old uncle, great uncle Alan would say. And I was just talking to retired NYPD detective David Sarney. You guys are like very salt of the earth. That's what I love about the NYPD. He also talked about the test. When you take the test, what is a written test, and then what? Walk us through that. What kind of things are they? What do they ask you?
They ask you, the test, geez, it was a long time ago, but they ask you, it's a multiple choice questions, and they'll ask you, things, put you in situations, and you just have to not guess, but you have to give the best answer you can on them. It's pretty straightforward. It's nothing tricky. There is some reading that you have to read, but you don't read too much into it, and then answer the questions. So it's a little time-consuming test, but most people pass it, no problem.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to talk about Adan Gonzalez. Take us back. Where were you working? I guess you were at the 2-5. Where is it? What year is this? And how does the call first come in? How do you first catch this case?
So I was working in the 25th Precinct Detective Squad. It was back in February of 2010. I actually it was overnight, so I wasn't actually working at that time. It was our night watch guys, but they responded to a male that was unconscious on the East 115th Street, 2nd Avenue in Harlem. And when they got there, he was slumped over. They see that they had some blood inside his shirt. So they waited, and he was EMS pronounced him at the scene. So at the scene, they had found a knife handle on the scene, which they secured. And then what happened was we detectives came in the morning to and from the 2-5 precinct, and they were assigned to it. So there was a different detective assigned to it, but as a squad, we all chip in and help on that case. So another detective had the case for a number of months, but I was helping them along with my partners, and that's pretty much how we initially get it at that point.
Yeah, so let me hop in there because I've got a question that's on my mind. I mean, this is, for those who do not know, this is Spanish Harlem. It's on the upper East Side of Manhattan, but it's a very busy area. Obviously, you said it's overnight, but when you're called to a scene like this, are you concerned like that the scene is compromised? Are people walking by? Do you know? Do the patrol officers tell you? Well, I know you guys found the knife handle, but I guess the question is, as soon as you get up there, I assume you're securing the scene, putting up the crime scene, and keeping everyone there. But it is a problem, because it's going to take you guys a few minutes to get there. So is that ever a concern or a worry?
It always is. You got to hope that the officers that responded, the uniform officers, secure that scene, rope it off. Make sure nobody goes in. And you also have to hope that they rope off enough of an area, because that crime scene can go for blocks. We don't know, but. Yeah, it's always a concern, but most officers do a pretty good job of blocking it off. And at that time, I believe, I don't remember the time, it was probably 3 or 4 in the morning when it happened. So there wasn't a lot of foot traffic on that street at that time on 115th to 116th and 2nd Avenue. Because yes, it's in the middle of Spanish Harlem, and it does get busy in the morning. So it was roped off, and officers secured that scene until in the morning when all the detectives can come in.
Okay, so you get in the next morning, and how does that handoff work? Like, do the patrol officers, are they waiting for you to come in that morning and then relay what happened? Like, are you asking them questions first?
Well, yeah, we'll ask them, the responding officers, but also overnight, like I said, we have a night watch team, which is a team of detectives, and they already start the investigation process in those early morning. And then they'll come in and they'll brief us what they have. They don't keep the case, they hand it over to us. So we then, from that point, start running with it.
So you start running with it. Kind of what's the first? You got the knife handle, obviously. So are you checking that immediately, sending that to a lab?
Yeah. So crime scene comes out.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Crime scene will come out, and they'll recover that. We send it, then they send it to our crime lab, and then we start interviewing, looking for video, interviewing possible witnesses, and that may have seen what happened.
And do you find someone like that morning who saw anything?
Yeah. So what happens is, in this case, there was a lot of people we had to seek out. There was a witness that had seen an individual going through the victim's pockets. And he then, we had to locate that person. We did locate that person eventually, and it turned out that he didn't have anything to do with it. He just thought the guy was drunk and was looking for money through his pockets. Turned out not to be our suspect. And then we realized that the victim had a cell phone on him, but it was missing when he was searched. His body was searched. So then we started to look for that phone and get phone records, which we did. We located some phone numbers and found that somebody had taken that phone. We then located, just to a roundabout speed up, we found an individual that had bought the victim's cell phone from a young Spanish kid in the neighborhood, and he had said he bought it for $50, and they took the SIM card out of it. He did give us the phone, and then we interviewed him on who was the person that he, got the phone from. He didn't really know. He just knew the kid comes into the store a lot. And with phone records on that victim's phone, the person who sold it to him had placed a call. So we found a female who was actually this kid's girlfriend. And we tracked this kid down. And he had stated that he was in the park and he met his cousin. And his cousin had owed him some money. And his cousin said, "Hey, I got this cell phone for you. Well, take it as, the money I owe you, you can have it." And actually gives the victim's cell phone to him.
Mm.
So that gave us a big lead on who we were initially looking for.
Yeah.
And that turned out to, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Let me, I hate interrupting, but I'm curious.
No,
So,
it's fine.
the person who is now deceased, obviously you ID him. You have to go and make a notification. Are you the one that goes and makes a notification? Please say that's always the toughest thing.
I did not. No,
you did not.
No.
So and
other detectives did.
And he was 20 years old.
I forget. He was in his young in his early 20s. Yeah.
Okay, but so who he is, and
yep.
At this point, you've got this cell phone connection. But you don't really know at this point who he's tied to or why he's tied to them or why this happened.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
All right. So let's pick it back up with the phone. Yeah.
Yep. So we then, in the course of the investigation, we find out that we find out the kid who actually gave the phone to his cousin. His name was Afili Rodriguez, and he had a street name of Scooby. So I don't know where they get these names from, but
Me either.
He was part of. Yeah. So what happens is in East Harlem, we had a problem back then with gangs, with a gang called Los Vagos. They were a Mexican gang that ran 117th Street, and they kind of muscled their way into businesses and stuff on 116th Street. They would fight with the Los Traviesos, Latin Kings, Nietas, all these gangs. So in the course of the investigation, we speak to a witness who says that that our victim, Adan Gonzalez, was at a bar, which is right there on 116th Street, and I believe it was 2nd Avenue right there. And he was pretty intoxicated, and when he left, he walked a girl home. On his way back to go to his residence, he apparently passes 117th Street, where a bunch of the Los Vagos were hanging out in front of the building. And they look at him, they look at each other, sizing each other up, and Adan, because he was intoxicated, started yelling, "King, Latin kings, Latin kings." So they were like, "You're a king?" And Adan just keeps walking. And when Adan walks, he walks to 116th Street. These individuals, 3 individuals, follow him. And they're on the opposite side of 2nd Avenue and 115. And they're both yelling back and forth to each other. So the 3 individuals from Los Vagos gang cross the street to the victim. And when they get across the street, they ask him if he's a Latin king. And at that point, one individual punches him in the face, the victim in the face, falls to the ground, and the other 2, one other kicks him, and then our suspect stabs him 3 times. Knife breaks off, and they run. So we get a story of what's going on. over the course of time, we go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. I was listening. Yeah.
Oh, I thought you would. Sorry. Over the course of time, we find out that 3 individuals get named in this assault. And one is, like I said, Feely Rodriguez. Another one was Oscar Corona. And the third was Paul Corona, not related. And Oscar Corona was nickname was Psycho.
That's never a good name. That's never a good name.
No.
But also, you got 2 potential suspects. Both last names are Corona, and they're not related.
Correct. Yeah.
Wow. The chances of that. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So what happens is we find out that that the individual named Paul Corona is the one who stabs the victim. Is the actual stabber. So what happens is this case for a while in 2010 lasts into 2012. We're interviewing a lot of people, not getting that much help from people because the gang members, they didn't really want to talk when we would speak to them. So what happens is there's an individual who gets arrested for being drunk and breaking a window. He comes in and he's spoken to somewhere around 2011 or so, 2012. And he basically says, I got a direct, he lays it out exactly what I just told you, exactly the same. And he says he was in his building and a bunch of the Los Vagos, the young Vagos, he calls it, come into the building, into the courtyard, and they're all hyped up. And he says that they're talking about they just beat some guy up around the corner. So our witness says he goes to bed. The next day he's down on 42nd Street in the subway, and he sees this kid Paul Corona on the subway. And Paul Corona says to him, "Hey man, did you hear about last night?" And he's like, "Yeah, what happened?" And he's like, "Man," he's like, "I stabbed that guy and the knife handle broke off." And he's like, "I think I left it there." So, again, what happens at that point is now that we know that Paul Corona is the stabber, or should be, we then send out detectives to follow Paul and try to get a DNA sample from him.
Okay. So that's if I can jump in there. So that's really like for him, that's incredibly damning because obviously as investigators, you're not going to release publicly that information that handle's there. But so this guy would not know, but he's telling you that he's kind of corroborating the story. How old is this guy, Paul Corona, roughly?
He's about 17.
So these are just like, I hate to say it, these are just like dumb kids who are not thinking about the consequences and growing up in kind of the thug life. Now, I got to tell you, when I was a reporter in New York and elsewhere, whenever we would go to crime scenes, you guys obviously be there, and then we would get there, and in certain neighborhoods, they just will not talk to you. So do you guys experience it? Because you said you were having trouble with talking to gang members. Like when you call them or bring them down to the station, what is it like for you? Do they just sit there with their arms crossed? Do you try to kind of coax them into talking?
Yeah, I mean, it depends what they're arrested for too, whether they can help themselves out, but we do try. And that's what happened with this witness. He was arrested. So we, as detectives in that precinct, have to debrief every prisoner that gets arrested. We have to, hey, do you know anything about homicide, shootings, anything you want to tell us about, whatever. And some people talk and tell us, and some people don't. And this individual did. And as I said, at this time, the detective who was assigned to the case, this lasts now into 2014.
Wow.
When They cannot get a DNA sample from Paul Corona. They follow him, can't, doesn't throw a cigarette, he doesn't throw anything out. They go to his job, and you're limited with how long you can follow him for.
Yeah.
So in 2014, the case detective that I worked with, he got transferred. So I told my lieutenant at the time, listen, I want to take this case, because it was kind of dormant for a while. And I kept thinking about this kid's mother and his family, and saying, I made it a point that before I retired, I was gonna get this kid.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens is, in 2014, I take it over, and the detective gets transferred. So I start to run Paul Corona, and I see he's got a court date in 3 days for smoking weed on the subway. Mm. So I'm like, in the Bronx, I'm like, I got to go to the Bronx court and follow him. So that day, I go to court and I see him. He goes into the courtroom. His court case is answered out pretty quick, and he comes walking out. And I'm like, oh, now I'm going to have to follow him like home, like for a while. Luckily, his buddy who got a summons with him came to court. He was late. So he decided to wait for him. So as they went back into the courtroom, it took a while for his case to get called, and they broke for lunch. So Paul comes out of the courtroom. I see him, and he goes into the bathroom. So I'm like, I got to go. So I go in the bathroom. He walks into a stall. I go into the stall next to him, and he's going to the bathroom. And I'm waiting, and I'm like, oh, how am I going to get DNA from this? So he comes out. It's not a pretty job. It's not. But he comes out, and he washes his hands, washes his face, takes a paper towel, wipes his face, throws it in the garbage, and he leaves. So I'm like, I don't think that's going to be good enough. I come out of the store. I'm on the phone with our crime lab, and I'm asking them, is that good enough? Can I use this paper towel? Mm-hmm. They're like, nah. They're like, no. We need a cup. We need a cigarette. We need something. Mm-hmm. I'm like, all right. I go outside. He's outside the courthouse now with his buddy. Mm-hmm. He then proceeds to walk. He's kind of looking at me now, like.
Yeah, I was going to ask you. Does he notice you? You're dressed in a suit? I take it.
I'm a distance away from him, but he kind of looks at me. Yeah. He kind of like gives me the side eyes, and I'm like, wait, he might be catching on to me. So I get on my phone and pretend I'm talking to somebody. Yeah. And I walk to my car, mm-hmm. which was across the street. I'm like, I gotta sit in the car. Mm-hmm. I sit in the car and I watch him, and he walks up the block and he goes to a bodega, and he goes in and he comes out, and I see he's got a coffee in his hand. He's about a half a block up from me, and a bagel. He eats it, and he's drinking his coffee. So I get out of the car, and I'm hiding behind a pillar of a building. And he comes walking towards me, towards the corner. And he's got the coffee cup in his hand. And he's looking around, and he's with his buddy. He takes a sip, and he drops it in the garbage pail.
Bingo.
The garbage pail's overflowing. I mean, to the top. And I could just see it. It's like glowing, like sitting on top. And I'm like, holy crap. I'm like, we've tried for years, and this is it. So I'm like, what is he going to do? He turns around, and he starts walking away from me. Wow. So here I am. I'm in a suit. I put a rubber glove on. I'm walking across the street. I put a rubber glove on. I got a paper bag. Yeah. I picked this cup up out of the garbage. There must have been 10 people looking at me like, what is he doing? Like,
But it's New York, so you can get away with it. Yeah.
Sealed it up, and I headed back to my office. And I called the district attorney who had the case. And I told her, I said, she's like, hey, what's going on? I'm like, you're not going to believe this. She's like, what? I said, I got Paul's DNA. She's, yeah. So she's like, you got to be kidding me. I'm like, no. She's like, send it right away. So I did. I sent it. And this process now, because it's not, it's been like 4 or 5 years. There is no rush on that DNA. You know, I called like every couple of weeks. Is there any results? Any results? Any results? And I got nothing. They're like, not yet, not yet.
Hang on one sec. Let me just. I just want to ask you a question.
Rodriguez.
Yeah, hang on one sec. So,
who was the one that punches the victim at first, gets arrested in the Bronx. I get notified of it, and I shoot up there. I sit down with him in an interview room, and I start talking to him. And he just got arrested for actually assaulting and stabbing somebody in the Bronx. So, sure.
We're on a bit of a delay here. That's my bad. But what I was going to ask, well, it was a long delay, but I was going to ask you, you know, this went on for many years. So, was it always in your mind? Like, how much does this, I guess the question is, how much does it eat away at a detective when a case sort of stalls out?
You broke up. I'm sorry. What was the question?
Yeah, just how much does it eat away at you when a case kind of goes dormant?
You know, with all the caseload that we have when you're a catching detective in a squad, there's sometimes you don't have time to look at the case, you know, and it is very frustrating. And especially when you're waiting on DNA to come, it could take 6 months, you know, so it does become extremely annoying, honestly.
So here you've got you think you have his DNA, you're waiting on the DNA results, and then tell me about Feely Rodriguez.
Yeah, Feely gets arrested for assaulting somebody in the Bronx. I go up there, sit him down, and I start talking to him. And I'm like, listen, man, I want to take you back to, 2010. So he's kind of giving me an attitude, like, I don't remember what I did yesterday. I'm like, listen, in 2010, and I go through it, I lay it out to him. And he's like, I go, there was a kid yelling, Latin King to you guys, and you went across the street and you guys, you assaulted him. And he's like, I don't know nothing about that. I don't remember anything. So keep going on with him. And okay, I go, well, I know you were there. I go, but, so I'm kind of like, I'm striking out here. He's not going to give me anything. And then he looks up at the cameras in the interview room and he goes, I know those things are on. And I look at him and I go, actually, they're not on. And he's like, they're not? I go, dude, I don't even work here. I go, I didn't even put those on. They're not on. I go, and I would tell you if they're on. And he's like, and they weren't on. So he's like, really, they're not on? I go, no. And he goes, all right. He goes, I was there. Just like that. I go, okay. And he goes, I remember everything about that night. Wow. And I said, okay, what happened? And he goes, that kid was yelling across to us that he was a king. So we went up to him. He goes, I asked him if he was a king. And he said yes. And I punched him 3 times. He goes, he fell to the ground. He goes, psycho. He goes, kicked him a couple of times. He goes, and Paul did what he did. So I said, well, what did he do? And he said, you know what he did. And I said, I need to hear it from you. And he goes, he stabbed him. He goes, I go, whose knife was it? He goes, I don't know. Paul had it. And he goes, I think it broke. Something happened to it. I don't know. He goes, but that's it. That's all I did. Yeah. So I'm like, this is a home run. Like, this is great, But
hang on one sec. Hang on one sec. So you're in an interview room, but you're really not recording any of this?
Not recording it because what happened was when we went in there, we just tried to feel him out. And plus at that time, I was in the homicide squad. I wasn't in the 2-5 anymore. Mm-hmm. So I went there taking a shot at him, and he spoke to me because he didn't want me to write anything. He didn't want anything taped. Yeah. So I said, we're just talking like men.
But how is that?
Exactly what happens.
Yeah. So, but how is that? Is that something that you can use? Because couldn't he just go back and say, I never said any of this?
So what happens is I call the district attorney. I tell him, I said, I'm going to come speak to you again. And I give him my business card. And he's like, all right. I said, we're going to have another conversation. He's like, okay. He goes, this kid Feely loves to talk about himself. He was that was a big thing with him. Like he was the shit.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like that was it.
Yeah.
So, I went, the DA was like, great. Let's see if we can get him recorded. So, I went, picked him up, brought him back in. And he was very cooperative. And he went on video and told the whole story again. Now, in this time frame, now I had to go back and get the other witness that was drunk, that gave us the whole story, and get him on board to be a witness, which was another feat and a half. When I brought him in under a ruse that he made a police report, and I sat him down and I started talking to him about this case. He goes, I knew it wasn't about when I got assaulted, that you were going to talk to me. And I'm like, no, it's about this homicide. He became very cooperative. The kid, Oscar Corona, psycho, I found out during the investigation, got deported to Mexico. He committed a crime and an assault and was shipped back to Mexico. So Paul was my next step, but I needed that DNA. And then months later, probably, I want to say, probably 6 to 7 months later, the lab called me and said that it was a match on the knife.
Wow.
So, I was ecstatic. The DA knew already, but the DA's office, again, now dragged their feet for another couple of years. It went on. And
why? I mean, if you have the DNA evidence,
district attorneys. So, I wish I could answer it. I pushed and pushed and pushed to get this taken care of. And I said, what are we doing here? And then one DA who had it was like, listen, I'm being taken off it because I have too much on my plate. So they gave it to another DA. That DA, who was an excellent DA, starts like, we're going to indict this. We're going to go forward. And then a case in New York that became very, very big was the Tessa Majors case, where she was a Columbia University student who was killed. Mm-hmm. That took all of us away from it, and that DA caught that. So he couldn't do it. It went on to another DA. Then finally, I got one DA who was like, listen, I go, just please, I want this done. Can you just do it? Like, for this family. Like, and I didn't speak to the mother or the sisters or anything like that of the victim, because I didn't want to get their hopes up. Mm-hmm. And, and then they're going to be calling, and they weren't calling. Like, they just, I think, were under the impression, listen, we're never going to find out. But then I got a real good DA who decided, go get him, pick Paul up. So that's what we did. We picked Paul up and brought him in. I interviewed him for a couple of hours. At first, again, he was denying it. I told him, I have your DNA. I have everything. And little by little, he started off, Scooby punched him. All I did was punch him. Mm-hmm. And then it went to, no, you did a little more than that. And then he said, I stabbed him. And his story was corroborated by the other witnesses we had. It was like, it couldn't have melded better, with their timelines and their stories. So Paul, then we arrested him and sent him in to jail, where Paul then was let out by a judge because the judge felt he had a family, he wasn't a flight risk, he had a wife and kids, and let him out with an ankle monitor.
Uh-huh.
So yeah.
Whoa. So hang on. So when
found out
when he commits his crime, how old is he and how old is he now?
he's 17 when he committed it, and I believe when we arrested him, he was about 26 or 27.
Okay. And so the judge lets him out. Yeah, the judge lets him out. He's got an ankle monitor on, and then what?
Yep. Correct. And then, the court proceedings start, and they keep, adjourning it. And then he decides to take a plea. And the DA's office, I found out, now I'm retired because when we make the arrest, I finally come to court and I meet the family, who were so happy and so shocked that there was an arrest because they hadn't heard anything for years. So it was a feel good moment at that point. Being there, that I just got lucky. Everything, following him, getting the DNA when guys tried for years. But I made it a point I was going to get that DNA. Somehow I was getting it. But then he takes a plea, and it's down to, they charge him with manslaughter. And he's going to be sentenced, from what I understand, coming up in June, to probably a year and a half in jail. And I just shake my head, because what justice is that for a family? Especially losing their son and brother.
Yeah, that's unbelievable to me. So
I'm sorry, Joel.
Yeah, no, we have a little delay going, but it's incredible to me that this guy murdered somebody in cold blood, and he's going to spend on a plea deal a year and something in change in jail or prison. But I mean, I got to tell you, Rich, it's definitely not luck that you did not have luck. You were tenacious the whole way through, and it's really commendable that you were trying to get justice for the family. I think that obviously there's issues within the criminal justice system that, number one, it took so long for them to prosecute this guy. And by the way, there is that saying, justice delayed is justice denied. So in this case, I think that really holds true. It's not fair to the family that this guy is basically getting a get out of jail free card, and he is a cold, calculated killer. Do you know? So is he just starting this sentence now? Do you think this guy's going to be a repeat offender?
So he was the last I found out that he was recently had to be rearrested under manslaughter charge, and that his court was adjourned till June for sentencing. So he took the plea, and he's looking at a year and a half. That's going to be his sentence. I mean, it took me. He's spending less time in jail than it took me to investigate this and close it. It took years, and he goes away for a year and a half. It's disheartening. And I can't even imagine how the family feels.
It's awful. I mean, this is an awful. I was not expecting this ending to this story, but do you feel? I mean, you know him, you've interviewed him, and you get a sense of him. Do you think he's going to reoffend? Is he the kind of guy that's going to get out and kill again?
You never know. You never do know. But speaking to him, he was and he was soft, and I mean he was a very. Speaking to him, he was 26, 27. He actually looked like he was a 17-year-old kid still. Mm-hmm. Very scared, very, do I think he's actually since the time of the crime, he hasn't really been arrested. That's why it took so long too for us, because he was pretty straight and narrow for years. He held down a job. Okay, got caught smoking weed on the subway, and got arrested. And somehow I didn't get notified about that, which I wish I did. I could have probably got DNA then, but
why didn't you get notified then? Was that a lapse in the system?
It's just, it depends. We put in these investigation cards, they're called, when we're looking for somebody, whether we have probable cause or where we're looking for them as a witness. And, sometimes back then, when you get fingerprinted now, that investigation card will pop up. Like, oh, wait, Detective Koprowski in the 2-5's looking to speak to him. They'll reach out. Back then, it was still like, if you ran the person in the computer, you'd see, hey, they're being looked at by Koprowski. Let's give them a call. If they don't do that, then, he slips through the cracks.
Let me ask you something. Do you ever, as a police officer, especially in the concrete jungle of New York City, you ever worry, like, in a situation like this? I'm not saying this guy specifically, you just said he's soft, but do you ever have concerns about your own safety that, you investigate these guys, maybe they're going to come after you? Or is that just a line that, like, criminals don't necessarily cross? Or do you have to be careful with that?
I mean, you don't, I never really thought of it that way, as like, oh, this guy might come after me. Like, I never really thought of that. It's always a possibility. I've heard cases of, we get those every once in a while. There'd be a threat to, we call it threats to a witness or an MOS, a member of the service. And, then those cops or detectives would be alerted, and they give those cops a radio to take home. Like, if they live within the city limits, if you live upstate like I do, that radio's nothing. You know what I mean? So you do have to worry, but I have guns, so we can.
We had a guy, it's a good friend of mine, a good friend of the show. His name is Detective Phil Ramos, Las Vegas Metropolitan Police, retired homicide detective, and he was narcotics for years. So he told a story on this type of show where he infiltrated the Cuban mob. I don't remember the details of the story, but basically he was at a red light in Vegas and 2 bullets whizzed by him. 1 or 2 hit his car. And they were trying to put a hit out on him. And this guy is Phil. I love him straight out of Central Casting. I mean, he's he's just like a cop's cop. And he said it was a little scary, but he was the same thing as you. He protected himself. But you guys, kudos to you. It's a super hard job, and I know police get beat up a lot in the media and the press. But so did you? Have you had a chance to sort of talk to Adan Gonzalez's family? Like, are they upset with this sentence? Are they just happy that someone was caught?
They're happy that obviously they got some closure to it, but I haven't spoken to them since I'm retired. And I reached out to a buddy of mine who is actually working for the DA's office and was involved with this with me. And he hasn't talked to the family yet. I'm sure the district attorney did, and they're not. How can you be happy with that? I mean, I don't think you can. They've lost their family member, and here the person who did it goes away for 1.5 years to cut a sweet deal. I just don't know I don't know what the district attorney's office is thinking when they make these decisions.
Yeah. Well, absolute honor to have retired NYPD detective Rich Koprowski here. 30 years with the NYPD, much of it with the 25th precinct up in Spanish Harlem. You just heard a case that went on for years. Rich got justice for the family, but it seems like the DA dropped the ball. And you see the cop shows and the detective shows, and it all looks easy, but you heard how hard it was in this case to get DNA. They had a knife handle. Rich spent literally years, and he said he got lucky. He didn't get lucky. It was gumshoe detective work, and in my eyes, all these guys are heroes. And thank you for your service, Rich. Appreciate you being on, and happy holidays.
No, thanks for having me.